Hello students, greeting of the day. This is Dr. M. Naglakshmi for your paper Research Methodology. So now we are going to see Unit 2, that is Mechanics of Writing Research. Right? Um, so any research process, there are some general steps involved. What are those? First one is defining problem. Then reviewing the available literature. We have seen that review of literature or survey literature, right? Then formulation of hypothesis or research questions. Creating a research design. Then collection of data with the help of various research tools. Then processing of the data collected. Then analysis and interpretation of the data. And the last one is report writing. So, what is the meaning of a report? Every research leads to the creation of a research report. So, report is the formal, logical presentation of the research that has been conducted so far. What is the purpose of the research report? Is to convey to the interested people the whole result of study in sufficient detail and to determine the validity of the conclusion. So, the culmination of research is in the form of research report, which explains with the clarity the various steps that have been undertaken to come to the conclusion. So, writing of a research report requires not only the technical skill but also a thorough knowledge of the subject matter, perseverance, and the right perspective on every aspect of the research problem. The ability to write effective report is one of the most useful skills a researcher can acquire. So the arrangement of ideas and interpretations of the findings is of utmost importance. In this regard, one of the major critic observes, we say it as simply as we possibly can. And this, that is, that a report is a communication from someone to another who wants to use that information. So the report may be elaborately formal in great many, institutions. Right? It is always planned for use. So every report writing, every research report is used in the future people. So what is the objectives of a report or a significance of a report? A well-written report helps in knowledge building in the concerned area, but also helps in future research. That's why we'll be giving in the conclusion part the scope of further research. What are the limitations we have faced during the process while doing our research? That also to be mentioned in the limitation of the research, and also what are the future scope available to extend this research or to give a different perspective also to be mentioned in the conclusion part. So now we are going to see the significance of a report. So while all the necessary information is presented in the appropriate manner so that the targeted readers may be able to understand and utilize the same. So the objectives of a research report, the first one is conveying of knowledge to the concerned people in the field of research. So proper presentation of the findings for further utilization of the recommendations. Number three, give impetus to the research in the concerned knowledge area. Number four, to re-examine the validity of generalization drawn by the researcher after the report has been submitted. Right? There are different types of report available. Right? So we are going to see how we are going to report for a project or thesis. There are other reports like business report, project report, dissertation, inquiry report. inquiry report of a commission, right? All those things are available. So what we are going to see is how we are going to report for the purpose of project or dissertation or thesis, right? So let us see the general guidelines of report writing. After the research process is over, many researchers face the difficulty of writing down the research. So it is advisable that before starting the report writing, the entire research time frame, planning and organizing of the study material is done on the basis of the objectives and hypothesis made. So, following, I'll give some of the basic guidelines that every researcher should follow throughout the research so that the report writing becomes lucid and manageable. First one, knowledge of the research material. So, the comprehensive and adequate knowledge of the research area by the researcher cannot be understated. So, it forms the backbone of the entire research process and is of vital importance at the time of analysis, interpretation, and report writing. So, number two is organizing of research material. Material collected must be organized and the notes made on them manageable and properly arranged with sufficient information which may be required. So the research information must be logically analyzed and represented in the correct sequence of time or occurrence. Number three, the continuous report, reflective thinking. That is, the researcher constantly reflects on the material and the data collected for a more comprehensive research report. So, a rough drafts, a prepared rough drafts, which help help the researcher with the research interpretation and generalizations to be more accurate and relevant to the research questions or hypothesis. Rewrite and polish the rough drafts. Careful revision of the drafts help in checking the development of the arguments in the report, representation of the material, as well as the cohesiveness of the entire report. So, preparation of the final bibliography. It is essential that from the very beginning of the research, the researcher must maintain a bibliography of the literature read, consulted, and incorporated in the research process. This bibliography is generally appended to the research project. It should be arranged alphabetically and be divided into various parts like names of the books, articles, reports, interviews, forecast, right? All those things. And what are the things consulted? Everything should be included in the bibliography. Footnotes and headnotes. The researcher must, whenever citing another author's work, make due footnotes or endnotes to add authenticity and reference to the report. There are various methods of writing bibliography and footnotes, right? We have seen some of them in the previous lecture. So consult those things and do proper things. So how you have to structure a report? The introduction, the first clear-cut statements as to the nature of the study, aim, and significance, sources of information, a scope of study, all those things should be included in the introduction part. Then a brief statement of the working hypothesis which guided the study, then explicit definitions of the units of the study should be given. Brief statements of techniques used in the study should be given. Then types of observations used and conditions under which the observations were made, and types of schedules formulated and conditions under which information was secured, and types of case history data secured, their sources, manner of presentation, and preliminary analysis made. So then sampling procedures and conditions of selection and testing for appropriateness, representativeness, and all those things. And then statistical procedures, data analysis, and then the data collected under which they were obtained. So these things are very, very important when they are doing the quantitative research. For qualitative research, some of the things are, shortened. So types of scaling techniques used, all those things should be mentioned in a proper order, right? So then brief description of the data and techniques during data collection, pilot study, then experiments conducted, all those things. Analysis of the data, discussions, all those things should be in order. Then major findings, and then last one, major conclusions reached about findings. Right. The special remarks, the problems encountered in gathering the data, classifying them, then analyzing them. So the possible discrepancies in the data collected, suggestions to subsequent investigators on same topics in the same context, then bibliographical references found useful in study with annotations, then appendixes might include sample questionnaires, transcription sheets, sample interviews, and all those things which involved during the data collection process. All should be properly, documented. Very, very important. That is a sound report. Uh, will include all those things. So the title page is the cover of the report, and the first thing that the targeted reader come in contact with. So it indicates the main theme or the title of the study. The title should be appropriate and attractive. So the title page may also contain the name of the researcher and date. So the basic format will be given by the respective class in charge, the format which we follow in our university. So you should follow the same for your project. Okay, so these are the very important things you should know when you are writing for your research report, right? Let us see the main body of the report once again. The main text provides the complete outline of the research report along with all details. So the title of the research study is repeated at the top of the first page of the main text and then follows the other details on pages numbered consecutively. So beginning with the second page. Each main section of the report should begin on a new page. So the main text of the report should have the following sections. What are those? First one is introduction. The purpose of an introduction is to give a background so as to make it clear to the reader why the problem was considered most worth investigating, right? And then the methodology. This represents the research design and method used in carrying out the research. So it should give the exact meaning of measurements or terms or variables used, selection of sampling, and then the tools of data collection, hypothesis, all those things, right? And then methodology, review of literature. Here, the report, the researcher assesses the important and relevant existing literature on the problem. So, the rationale of the review is to develop form the conceptual framework and background of the research, which will become the source of formulation of the hypothesis. That is, the review of literature, using the review of literature to find out the research gap of the chosen research topic. Then analysis and interpretation. This is the most crucial part of the report. In it, the data which has been collected is processed, analyzed, and interpreted. Various generalizations and inferences are drawn. So there must be a clarity and continuity in the presentation of the text and result. The next one is findings and recommendations. A detailed presentation of the findings of the study with supporting data in the form of tables, or if you are using charts with validation of results, these things mainly for the people who are doing the quantitative research, right? For them, they use charts, tables, all those things. So this is the next step in writing the main text of the report. This generally comprises the main body of the report, extending over 2 3 chapters sometimes. So all relevant results must find a place in the report. So toward the end of the main text, the researcher should gain, should again put down the results of the research clearly and very precisely. So he or she should state the implications that flow from the results that study. Should then state the recommendations. The final thing is conclusion and or summary. The main text of the report must end with the summary of the report or the conclusion drawn from the findings. Right? And then references, appendices should also be enlisted in respect of all technical data such as questionnaires, sample information, any interviews, all those things. A single appendix should be headed appendix and centered on the page in capitals without punctuation and 3 single spaces below the headings. So each appendix is numbered and started on a new page. Appendices should be listed in the table of contents together with page numbers. Okay, should be placed between the final chapter and the bibliography or immediately after bibliography. So at the end of the research report, all the consulted sources of data, whether primary or secondary, reference books, articles, reports, or unpublished material, etc., must be listed in a bibliography. The purpose of a bibliography is to provide cross-reference and authenticity of the report. It should be in alphabetical order, as we have seen in the working bibliography lecture. The style of writing the bibliography depends upon whether there is already a prescribed form. That is, we usually follow the MLA style, right? So this is the citation should be uniform, right, throughout the research project. So this is the very important thing you should understand before writing your research report, right? See you in the next lecture.